Chapter 1. Welcome to the Fennel. The Fennel had been fashionable a century ago when a balcony and a bulletproof vestibule were the same thing. Its cornices sagged like tired eyebrows. Its lobby smelled faintly of lemon and radiator steam. When Lena signed the lease for 4C, the super slid the papers across a folding table and said, "No smoking.
No candles."
Don't wedge the fire doors." Then he paused in a way that suggested there was a fourth rule. He did not care to marinate in daylight. "What's the last one?" Lena asked. He tapped the laminated evacuation map on the wall, a floor plan gone greasy with years. "Elevator slow," he said. "Stairs are faster in a fire. Not for exploring." "Not for," she prompted. "Exploring," he finished, as if he had chosen the word carefully from a drawer. "If you need up, call me." "I can handle stairs," she said, half a joke, because the super was shaped like a jack and she wanted him on her side. He squinted at her luggage, at the 2 book boxes with their bulging bottoms, at the plant that had learned how to look stoic in a moving van. "You a runner? You look like somebody who runs." "Used to," she said.
New job.
"Night desk at the museum." She didn't add. New city, cheap rent, 3 boxes of choices pretending to be a life. He handed over the keys, front door, apartment, mailbox, and a slender brass one that puzzled her until he said, "Storage. Basement level C. Don't go past the green paint. If you hit blue paint, you've gone wrong." The elevator wore brass like a memory. Lena set a box against her shin and pressed the up button. The button exhaled a tiny sigh and committed to nothing. She watched the shadow of the car hesitate between 2 floors like a polite liar. "Stairs," she said to herself, and pushed through the heavy fire door with her back. The stairwell smelled of wet concrete and old varnish. The steps were shallow, worn to a gentle dip in the middle. A narrow window washed the well with a pale swatch of afternoon, dust moving in it like sleep. She took the first flight and turned. Half a landing left. Second flight. Turn. She kept her hand on the rail because the rail had been touched by hands that knew something she didn't. A painted 2 met her at the landing. She climbed again. 3 again.
2.
She stopped, breathing not hard but with a small frown the body makes when arithmetic refuses. The decorative tile at the landing edge, brown rhombuses, matched the 1-2 flights below in a way that felt more personal than pattern. She set the box down and went back down 1. 1, up again. 1. She stared at the number until it stared back. Down again, down, and now the painted B appeared, white on green, with an arrow toward laundry and storage. From below, a door banged. A voice shouted, "Hold it," and the super, Eli, he had said in the hallway, came puffing into view with a coil of cable on his shoulder. He took one look at her face and the box on the landing.
"Ah," he said mildly.
"You met our trick." "It repeats," she said, making herself laugh, because she preferred jokes to fear. "It descends," he said, "even when you don't." He picked up her box with a grunt that made the plant in it rustle. "Elevator's free now. Come on." The elevator was not fast, but it was faithful. It opened when they asked it to, creaked, and delivered her to the 4th floor with a groan that sounded affectionate if you wanted kindness for machines. The corridors wore the same paint color every old building chooses when it has exhausted its ambition, a green like hospital blankets. For C had a brass plate that had once been wiped daily and now wore the sullen smears of fingers. Inside, cheap light, slant of late sun, parquet scuffed smooth by feet, a window over a fire escape that did not care for safety but liked views. A wall heater that believed in ghosts. The air held the smell of other people's suppers, the onion and tomato sauce kind that makes loneliness feel negotiable. Lena walked the rooms, small bedroom, smaller kitchen, a living room with a door in the corner that didn't belong, closet-sized, locked. She tried her keys from habit. The slender brass, one slid in and turned. The door opened onto darkness, and then a switch clicked and showed her a utility shaft. 2 steps down to a graded platform, then a narrow metal stair curling around something she could neither see nor describe. She shut the door on it instantly and locked it and stood with her forehead against the cool wood, trying to make a joke to herself. failing. From the hallway, someone's laughter, most likely television, bubbled and burst. The floor under her feet felt like a gentle boat. She went back to the elevator and brought up the plant and the remaining books and told the stairwell out loud, in the tone you use with cats, "We're fine." In the mailroom, a man with a placard caned sorted junk mail into a canvas bag with the dexterity of a magician. He had eyebrows like punctuation and a bow tie that felt like defiance. "New, are you?" he said without looking up. "Lena," she said.
Marchand, he said.
"Third floor, end of the hall." "Don't say Mr. Marchand unless you're selling me something." "I won't buy it." "Is the stairwell always like that?" She tried to sound curious, not like someone complaining about gravity. He shrugged and nodded all at once. "Been like that since before me. Some nights better, some worse. Don't drink and climb, that's my advice. You'll end up in the boiler room and call it heaven." "Is that a joke?" "Only if you keep laughing," he said. His cane knocked once on the tile, the gentlest warning she'd ever been given. "You up nights." "Security at the museum," she said. "One of us should keep an eye on the old things." "Keep an eye on the new ones," he said. "The old ones behave because we wrote them down." Welcome to the Fennel. Her first night, the stairwell kept its manners. Lena moved between elevator and apartment, less the owner than the guest. She put the plant on the windowsill and watched the city turn the color of bruised fruit. Outside, traffic theater. Inside, someone practicing a scale on a piano badly, but with discipline. At midnight, pipes clanged as if the building were clearing its throat to sing. Her locked utility door sat in the corner and did nothing. She went to bed with the window cracked and the blankets doubled and dreamed about walking upward while her calves burned and never reaching the landing where the big window showed the sky. At 3, footsteps ran the hallway, 2 floors above by the sound. A woman laughed, then shushed herself mid-laugh. The steps passed her door, receded, then crossed her ceiling. Lena sat up, heart percussive. The pipe behind the plaster gave a small cough. She held still long enough to decide she had heard construction in a different building, relaxed, and slept again. In the morning, the elevator had a handwritten note taped beside the button. "Out for inspection. Use stairs." The tape had been put on in a hurry. The edges curled like the tongue of a bored dog. Work laid its demands on her. She set a deadline for fear. 2 flights, she told herself. "I learned to run in bad shoes. It's fine." Down 1 flight. 3. Down the next. 2. She turned with a confidence she did not own and took the next. 1. She heard traffic, rain on the vestibule, the crack and slap of the postman's sandals. She took 1 more flight out of rebellion and met the again with its green paint and its arrow, the white line across the concrete, saying "Mind your head." Behind her, footsteps. The kind of cautious footfalls a person makes when the stairwell has demanded a part of their dignity and they intend to keep what's left. Lena stepped aside and glanced up. A girl in a red sweater clutched a grocery bag with both arms, 19 or 30, age hard to tell the way it always is in winter when everyone wears the same layers. She looked down at Lena and then looked at the painted bee and saw it too and made the small full body flinch of someone meeting an idea they had been refusing. "You live above?" Lena asked, absurdly, as if people lived below numbers. 8, the girl said, and then shook her head. "It was 8. It's not 8 now." They stood there like idiots and decent people. The girl set her groceries down, and the bag mewed. Lena laughed before she could help it. The girl lifted the top of the bag to show a cat with a face like a disgruntled pastry. "I'm Kara," she said. "Welcome." Helpful hints. Never take the stairs up after 10 unless you want to be late to everything. And if your sink backs up with what looks like black hair, it's not hair. Don't poke it. "What is it?" Lena asked. "Regret," Kara said cheerfully, and shouldered past her toward the laundry room. "You get used to it." Lena climbed back up to 1, pushed open the heavy door, and stepped into the lobby, which was not the lobby. It was another lobby, a twin. Same fern in the same brass pot, same resident notices on the corkboard. Yoga with Marisol, Thursdays 6 p.m. Lost keys, sailboat keychain. but the desk was empty, and the mailboxes had different names. A smell of bleach, so stern it felt like rules. She turned back to the stair door, touched it like a mirror she didn't trust, and descended one flight, and opened that door and found her own lobby with its hydrangea in a plastic pitcher and the super's grunt rising from a wheeled chair. Eli did not look surprised to see her. "Took the scenic route," he said. "You have 2 lobbies," she said. "You have 2 everythings." "We have what we keep," he said, which felt like a sentence with a hinge in it. "You're on 4. Best to count your way there. Numbers won't do it for you yet." "Count what?" she asked, honestly curious.
He pointed at her chest.
"Breaths," he said, and tapped the desk as if the conversation had been a receipt he was filing. "You get lost, you come back down and start again. The building likes early. The building likes early," he repeated, as if punctuality were a virtue with teeth. "Check your mail. You got a circular from a grocery that closed in '89 and a flyer for a church that burned down." The Fennel is nostalgic. Her mailbox contained exactly those things, and a postcard with no stamp, a photograph of the Fennel in the 1920s, flapper at a window, boys in caps leaning against the iron fence. On the back, in a neat hand, "If you are on an even floor at night, do not hum on the stairs." No signature, no apartment number, only welcome printed small in the corner, like a confession. Lena tucked the card in her jacket's inside pocket. She took the elevator because the elevator had consented to service again, and because she wanted to arrive somewhere, herself intact. Night came. The museum was all corridors and a sculpture that looked like a mistake built to be praised. Lena sat at the monitors, watched daytime people pose with a dinosaur tail, watched a guard she would not learn to eat yogurt with the ardor of a saint. At 2 she took her break and called her sister and described the stairwell and the postcard and the utility door in her living room that opened onto a private little well. "Get a cat," her sister said. "Cats are good at this kind of geometry." "Like having a compass," Lena said. "No," her sister said. "Like having someone to talk to when the fridge makes a human noise. I'll Venmo you adoption fee." Lena wrote down cat on a napkin, and then don't HUM, and then count BREATHS, and fell asleep at 5:30 with museum light humming on the back of her eyelids until her relief jostled her arm and said, "You drool, new kid," fondly abusive. Back at the Fennel, Dawn learning the windows. The stairwell sat with its green paint and its numbers like a test in a language you almost speak. She took one step and breathed in, took one and breathed out. She didn't count in numbers. She counted in something like the beat of walking.
She climbed.
The landings paid attention. 2, 3, for appeared like good students. She reached the 4th floor with the kind of tired you're proud of. At the corner of her living room, the utility door sat very quiet. She put the postcard up on the fridge with a magnet the previous tenant had left, a magnet shaped like an eggplant with a phone number for a pizza place that no longer existed. She made coffee and watched the stairwell in her mind like a movie. After 2 days of making do, she bought chalk. Chapter 2. The Rules You Don't Write Down. She bought chalk at a drugstore that had once sold corsets and now sold praise. The clerk, a boy with an undercut and a mouth that couldn't resist the shape of sarcasm, watched her choose white chalk overcolored and said, "Teacher energy."
"Ghost energy," she said.
He didn't blink, which meant either the city had taught him not to react, or the store had rules about indulging customers. She started in daylight, because Eli had said the building likes early, and because Kara's cat had yowled at night like an alarm clock set wrong. On the first landing, she drew a line at the edge of a stair, a neat chalk smear that made the ancient concrete remember. On the second flight, she drew another. Up, mark, The chalk left dust on her fingers that tasted like kindergarten. 2, 3, 4, at 5. The chalk mark she made seemed to glimmer for a second in the light from the little window. She looked back down. The marks were there, a ladder of white commas. She set her palm on the rail and descended one. 4 good. Up 1. 4 again. She looked at her own line and felt something turn in her mouth. Some taste that had been invisible until now. Not metal exactly. Not ozone. The air in the stairwell had a flavor, Cold brick, chalk, the ghost of a perfume from somebody's neck in 1930. On the third day, she met the boy who sang. He sat on the turning of the stairs between 3 and 4, hoodie pulled over his head, a backpack open beside him like a dark flower. His face was the malleable kind that could be 14 or 22, depending on light and posture. He was not handsome, not. He had the wary look of someone trying to keep a place by sitting still. He sang under his breath, wordless, 2 notes and a slide that showed he had learned his voice for himself, not for praise. "Don't hum," Lena said softly. "Even floors." He stopped, still wary, and then smiled because he recognized a fairness when he heard one. "It's odd," he said. "I'm even." "Not here," she said. "On the landings even is odd." She realized she had made a theology and shrugged.
Sorry.
New tenant. "Everybody has a warning. You one of those 'this building eats people' ladies?" he asked. Not cruel. Curious the way kids get curious when they think you're making rules for the sake of it. "I'm one of those count your breaths ladies," she said. "I'm also one of those get your mail in the daytime ladies." "You?" "Gabe," he said. "I deliver for He gestured with his chin toward his bag. "When I'm late, I tell them the building put the floor in its pocket. They give me a smiley face and a write-up." "They still take it," Lena said. He nodded. He watched her draw a chalk line and said, "I could draw arrows." "Arrows make the building proud of itself," she said. "It shows you the wrong way out of spite." He laughed, teenager now, and shook his head. "Lady, that's not how buildings work."
"It is here," she said.
"Don't get poetic on the stairs, either. They like it." He stopped laughing then, tilted his head, and looked past her up the well to where the little window cut daylight into a rectangle. "You hear that?" he asked. "What?"
"Footsteps," he said.
"Up above. Coming down." He was right. Somebody was running the stairs above them, light feet, fast, the rhythm of a person who knows a certain number of steps belong to them and intends to remind the building. Lena stepped back out of the way. A woman materialized one turn up, then another, then on their landing, a woman in her 40s with the hair of someone who commits to the salon as a faith. She ran with finesse, as if the stairs were a language she spoke. "Morning," she said, barely winded. "Evening," Gabe offered, nonsense, and the woman grinned. "You're new," she said to Lena. "I'm Hallie. 5th floor. Don't write in the guest book. It gets copied." Lena extended her chalk hand automatically. Hallie shook it and came away dusted. "Gabe says the building eats people," Hallie said, mouth turned up. "I say the building eats habits." "What does it give back?" Lena asked. "Bills," Hallie said cheerfully, and bounded down another flight. At the 2 landings she paused and shouted up without turning around. "Don't hum on the even floors. Don't count aloud. And don't," she stopped. The gap between 2 and 1 swallowed the rest. "Don't what?" Gabe asked. Hallie's voice floated back. "Don't carry a mirror." "Okay, now that's crazy," Gabe said. He slung his bag and vanished down the next turn, and his footsteps passed under them and under again in a pattern that did not precisely match the floor numbers. Lena held the chalk like a talisman. She had drawn 10 marks on 10 steps, and the stairwell had allowed itself to be a place. She climbed to 4, to 5, to 6, and opened the fire door there. A hallway she did not recognize sat behind it. Carpet of a different era, picture rail, a framed photograph of the Fennel when the city had horses. A woman in a housekeeping cart pushed a bin of linen past her, without looking up. The sign over the elevator read the Fennel Apartments, 12th in a font that had not been fashionable since the day the photograph had been taken. She closed the door gently. "Okay," she said to the stairwell. "I see you." She went down 2 turns and opened the 4 door. Her green paint, her hydrangea in a plastic pitcher, her hallway reliable as a wrong turn. She went in. She took a nap on her couch because sometimes that is the only sane reply to architecture. When she woke, the utility door in the corner had a draft. She felt it on the skin of her cheek before she admitted there was a difference in the air. She stood, crossed the rug, set her palm against the wood, cold like an unvisited room. She took the brass key out of her pocket, gave herself a look for doing what she had just told Gabe not to do. No exploring, and turned the key anyway. The stairs behind that door were metal, grated, and far older than the carpet in her living room. They curled around a shaft that did not accept the concept above. The light came from below, soft, electric, like a basement fluorescing under a closed parade of floors. She took one step down and then another, and found a landing with a shelf and a ledger so old the leather had cried itself into cracks. She opened it because she did not have any respect left to spend. The last written page had a column of dates, 1931 through 1933, and names she did not recognize. Underneath, in a darker ink, a different hand. If you leave your window open, you'll hear the choir at 3. A line crossed it out. Under that smaller "don't count out loud." She closed the book on her fingers like a penitent and then opened it again and tore out the last page because now that she had broken a rule, she might as well do it in a way that produced something to hold. On her way back up, the stairs went down. She felt her breath shorten with the kind of complaint that isn't fear yet but knows where fear is stored. She climbed 2 more steps and found herself one below, where she had been when she decided to go up. She put her hand on the rail and counted the way Eli had said, breaths in the bone, not numbers in air, and the metal consented. 1, 2, 3, up, and the little door opened onto her living room like a grace she had paid for. There was a note slid under her front door. Storage, green paint only typed in the building's polite font, and below that, in blue pen, you'll hear them practice after midnight. Don't hum.
No signature.
The blue ink looked like women's handwriting, but this was a building. It could belong to anyone. She put the torn page from the ledger in the freezer because that is where you put objects that have the smell of an ending, her grandmother's rule. She took a shower in water that smelled faintly like the stairwell and went to work. The museum at night made more sense than the fennel in daylight. Locks obeyed. Alarms blurted and apologized. A custodian named Minerva taught her which vending machine ate 20s and which one felt shame. At 2, Lena took her break and unfolded the page from the freezer in her imagination like a map. She didn't take it out. She sat on a stool by a window and watched 3 taxis accumulate and depart like oiled moths. When she got home, the elevator wore another note. Button malfunction. Do not hold door. Someone had drawn a smiley face that looked like a wound. She stood in the lobby, holding the basil plant she'd bought because plants had always liked her and because basil made kitchens pretend to be kind. The stairwell door was heavy and tasted of old varnish when she pushed it open with her shoulder. She drew a chalk mark at the first riser and a second on the third and counted breaths. At 2, she felt sensible. At 3, she felt smug. At 4, she felt the small push in her sternum that meant the building had decided to test whether she meant it. She exhaled slowly like someone about to swim. She climbed. 5 appeared like luck when you've done the math right. 6 tried to forget itself. 7 wore a cheap carpet from 1987 like a skirt. 4 came back and showed her the hydrangea and her own hallway. She stood with her forehead against the fire door and laughed without opening it because the sound of a grown woman laughing alone in a stairwell is the kind of thing that teaches buildings bad habits. Okay, she said again, but this time the word had a different weight. Okay. She went down 2 flights and found B with the green paint and the arrow. She opened it and stood in the laundry room, which had 3 washers, 5 dryers, 2 with out-of-order signs, a bulletin board with a flyer for a missing scarf, and a vending machine that sold detergent and mystery. A door at the far wall wore a sign. Storage C. She tried her brass key. It turned with a little squeak like a rodent. Inside, cages with padlocks, some open, some holding cardboard boxes that had grown a second skin of dust and kitchen grease. Lena found her cage because it had been labeled by a hand that knew rulers. For C in block letters on duct tape. Inside, a single wooden chair with a broken rung and a framed photograph of a family sitting on a stoop in summer. The father's shirt off, the mother's hair in a scarf, 2 children holding popsicles like torches. On the back, in pencil faint enough to be shy, we went up as far as we could. It kept being down.
R.
She left the photo where it was because she did not want to bring their sentence upstairs. She returned to her living room. The utility door sat in the corner like a guest with secrets. She put the chalk in a bowl by the front door, and the basil on the sill, and the postcard on the fridge, and the brass key on the table. She slept and did not dream. The next morning there was a word on her doormat, written in chalk so faintly she wondered if she had imagined it. Humming. She looked both ways down the corridor and saw nothing but green paint and a shopping bag someone had left outside for A like a test. She wiped the chalk word away with her shoe. She went to the museum and kept people from touching things that pretended not to mind. Chapter 3. Up is down is you. She lasted a week before she invited someone in. Not a friend, those were in other cities. Not a date, she was not, as her sister would have said, fit for charming. A delivery man. She ordered a bookshelf from a company that liked to pretend to be Scandinavian. The bookshelf arrived in a box, so long the elevator would hate it. Stairs okay? The driver asked, already knowing. Not exactly, she said. I'll ride the elevator with it. You take the stairs and meet me on 4. If you get lost, count your breaths. He looked at her the way delivery men look at women who warn them about stairs. Sure, he said, because his job contained all kinds of religions. She watched him disappear into the stairwell, shoulders squared against geometry. The elevator arrived. The box wedged. Eli appeared with a crowbar and scolded the door like a misbehaving nephew. They wrestled the box in together while the elevator explained its heart in little mortal noises. On 4, the doors opened onto an empty hall. She waited. She listened. She took a step into the stairwell and felt the building decide to play. She took a breath and counted. She went down 1 flight and opened the door and saw a hallway with 7 mail slots. Wrong. And a runner rug that remembered cigarettes. Down another. A lobby with brass that had never tarnished. Across and up and across, counting like prayer. On the 3 landings, she met the driver sitting with the box, panting, sweat darkening his cap. 4th floor, he said bleakly. 4th is a rumor. She sat beside him on the landing, and they let their breath talk to each other until it became one conversation. We can wait for early, she said. Early, he asked. The building likes early, she said. It's cranky after 10. It's 10:30, he said, checking his watch. Do you live here? Is this a Halloween place? She laughed. August is a Halloween place around here. He looked at his hands, slid his ring back and forth a millimeter. I can't be late twice to the same address, he said. They take my route. Okay, she said and stood. Okay. We'll go down to the lobby and start over. Count breaths. Don't hum. Don't carry a mirror. What? He asked, genuinely alarmed at mirror as a rule. We can discuss the new physics later, she said. Now we just accept them. They went down. The lobby agreed to be the lobby. They looked at each other, nodded like conspirators, went back into the stairwell, and climbed. 1, 2, 3, for appeared like steps in a recipe that has decided to be merciful. On the 4th floor, the hall looked like the hallway she owned a piece of. She held the stair door with her foot, and the driver dragged the box out like a fisherman landing a catch that had agreed to be landed, but would make a story of it anyway. Thank you, she said, signing his tablet with a finger that left chalk on glass. He left down the elevator in a way that suggested he would consider all future buildings with suspicion. Lena dragged the box inside and leaned against it and breathed the way the stairwell had taught her, slowly, with dignity. The bookshelf instructions were a love letter to the hex key. She built it while night happened politely outside her window. The hydrangea kept being artificial. The basil leaned toward the city. At midnight, footsteps ran through the ceiling again. Not above this time. Below. She lay on the floor and pressed her cheek to the parquet and felt the footsteps pass under her left ear, then under her right, then up through the column of air the utility door kept to itself. She stood. She unlocked the utility door. She went 2 steps down to the grated landing and put her ear to the cold air. From below, not far, a sound like rain on paper. She flicked on the little light. The stairs looked like patience. She counted 3 breaths and ascended to the next landing and the one after. On the 3rd, a door opened off to the side. waist-high like a child's thought. It had a brass plaque, roof access. She laughed out loud.
No, she said.
No, you don't. She opened it anyway, because she had claimed to Gabe that she was not poetic and wanted to learn if she had lied. The door gave onto a narrow corridor of dead pipes and bundled cables, the kinds of guts buildings have when they intend not to apologize for their mess. At the end, a ladder led up 3 rungs to a hatch. She pushed. The hatch opened on a dark room that smelled like old wood and varnish, and the breath of 1,000 parties. She lifted herself into it cautiously, like rising into a church. It was, perversely, the lobby. A lobby from 100 years ago, polished floor, long rug, heavy velvet chairs doing their best to be domestic in a public space. The ceiling had a skylight through which a black night sky looked down. No stars, no moon. Something like velvet with no pile. Lena stood in the center of the room and turned once to teach herself courage. On the far wall, the elevator with gates of iron sat with its mouth open. Beside it, the stair door had a transom window with etched glass that said down in letters shaped like laws. Of course, she said. Of course you do. She went back through the hatch, down the 3 rungs of the ladder, down the corridor, through the child-sized door, back onto the curled stair. She stood at the landing and looked into the shaft. It wasn't a shaft. It was a well, and the walls did not decide to meet. Below her the light brightened in an impossible way, like dawn in the wrong direction. When she climbed back to her living room, there was chalk on her doormat in a smaller hand than the last. Don't count aloud. Under it, an arrow pointing to her door. She wiped it away because she didn't want the building to learn graffiti, then wrote thank you with her heel in the dust that remained. The next day in the mailroom, Marchand said, "You didn't hum, did you?" "No," she said, "but I opened a roof in my floor." "Do not," he said sternly, "carry a mirror." Hallie said the same thing. "She used to," he said, "until her friend did." "What happened?" Lena asked. Marchand narrowed his eyes. "If you carry a mirror while you climb, the building shows you what it wants instead of where you're going. And the where is always lower." "That sounds like a story for the kids," she said, but her tongue had turned itself into a study in dryness, and she had to swallow in a way that felt televised. "Stories are what keep us from carrying mirrors," he said, and his cane knocked on the tile again, this time twice, as if calling something that had already arrived. Lena bought a hand mirror anyway and set it on her dresser as a dare to herself and did not take it into the stairwell. She called her sister and said, "You can Venmo me cat money now," and her sister said, "Finally," and posted her 3 photos of cats from the shelter, each with eyes like arguments. Lena chose the ugliest, the one with one ear notched by a story, and named her Journal, because that's what you keep when numbers refuse. That night she told Journal, in the tone you use with companions who won't write your life down for you, "If I don't come back, cry," and Journal blinked and sneezed as if to say, "You're not my first experiment." Lena took chalk and the brass key and a flashlight. She left her phone on the kitchen counter with the voice memo app open, in case stories were a kind of gravity. She opened the utility door and went down, counting breath like pennies. On the ledger shelf, the old book waited. She did not touch it. She took the child-sized roof access door and climbed into the polite, wrong lobby. She walked to the etched glass stair door that promised down and put her hand on the rail like making a vow. On the first landing, the window showed not the city, but a wall of brick much too close for neighbors. On the second, the window showed sky the color of unbruised fruit. On the third, the window showed nothing at all, not black, not gray, a colorless space that gave her throat the urge to hum, and she bit the inside of her cheek to stop herself and tasted iron. On the 4th landing, a chalk line, not hers, a neat small dash, like a person taller than Lena had bent without bravado and made the world agree to it. Under the dash, a smudge that could have been a fingertip. In the dust at the foot of the stair, a word written in the same small hand as the note on her doormat. Breathe. She breathed. She climbed. Down took her up, and then took her down. She came out on B in a different year. There was a poster for a dance. Tickets 35 cents. There was a calendar with a month she wanted to argue with. She stood very still and swept the beam of her flashlight across the green paint that had not yet learned green. There were lines, 7 chalk dashes, each blurred by the small rub of a finger. "This isn't stairs," she said out loud, breaking her own rule, forgetting not to talk. "This is an argument." The stairwell did not answer. Her voice wrapped around the iron rail and went down, and somewhere below, gently, another voice returned it to her almost the same, as if teaching her how to say her own name backwards. She did not bring a mirror. She counted breaths. She put her hand on the rail and decided that early belonged to anyone who refused midnight, even at 2. When her phone on the kitchen counter finished recording 10 minutes of silence, it added to the file one brief sound at the end, a human voice, Lena's but not, whispering counted in a tone she hadn't heard since childhood, and the cat leaped from the counter as if avoiding a footstep that did not happen. Chapter 4. Choir at 3. The cat woke her with a yelp that was half sneeze, half pronouncement. Journal stood on Lena's chest, staring past her to the corner where the utility door lived, tail lifted like a flag. The air was cold in a way that made her molars ache. The radiator ticks had synchronized with something outside, like 2 clocks arguing. On the kitchen counter, her phone screen was dark. The overnight voice memo had stopped after 10 minutes, as always. When she tapped to play it back, it was what it had been all week. Room tone, the distant old hum of the building, and then, at the end, that breath-sized whisper laid over the silence like a stamp. Counted. Her own voice, but not a syllable that came from slightly below her ears. She watched the counter for a long moment, the way you watch a glass to see if it will decide to shiver. Then she put the phone face down, made tea, and carried the warm mug to the utility door just to be disrespectful in a way that wouldn't get her killed. At 2:47, the hallway outside 4C smelled like hallway. At 2:59, it learned a new odor, wool, breath, the collective exhale of a dozen throats. The stairwell door, when she eased it open with her shoulder, exhaled cold with the smell of wet concrete underneath. The window above the first landing was a gray square, like a polite lie. She put her chalk in her pocket. She did not bring the mirror she had purchased, and tried not to moan. 3, she told the air. "Show me what you show." The sound began as a pressure on the skin. The hairs on her arms lifted. The landing below her, 3, caught a wave of it first, a long ash of tones so soft the stairwell had to explain it to her. Not singing. Not string instruments. Air, braided. People counting breaths, not numbers. The stairwell made a throat of itself. She took one flight down and stopped. The sound grew, not louder, a shade darker. She could hear the person who handled the low, the breath that would once have been a man's, or a woman who knew how to carry a room. She could hear the runners, the thin, airy strokes like the steps above her catching themselves before they fell. From below, a door eased shut. From above, a footstep not attached to anyone tried its weight on the next step up and then reconsidered. The chalk in her pocket warmed under her hand. On 2, the window showed the city as if the city had agreed to hold still. A midnight street lamp measured in equal pieces, empty intersection. A bus giving a side nobody. On 1, the window showed brick, so close a person who didn't believe in buildings would have called it a joke. On the half landing between 1 and B, the window admitted nothing at all. No black, no light, just the kind of neutral that tells your teeth to hum whether you want to or not. Lena bit the inside of her cheek, tasted iron, kept her mouth closed. At B, the green paint looked very green, the arrow to laundry/storage very reasonable. The choir. Not a choir, she corrected herself, because that word would get her in trouble, gathered itself below, and left a seam in the air you could hook a finger into. She stood with her back to the laundry door and looked down the last flight to the corridor with the white line that said "Mind your head," the one that became the warren of cages and the soda machine that sold mystery. Past that, beyond the green, the concrete changed colors. The line where someone once had repainted everything below a certain height stood there like an unelected border. Beyond the green, a thin band of something else showed near the floor where the paint had chipped, a blue too bright for basements. "Don't go past the green," Eli had said. If you hit blue paint, you've gone wrong. Lena took the chalk out of her pocket. She drew a small line on the bottom riser leading to the blue, a comma, nothing dramatic, just enough to make the stair feel seen. Then under it, very small, she wrote thanks. The chalk dust hung in the cold like reluctant smoke. Footsteps behind her. She turned and saw a shadow at the top of the flight from 1. Someone stopped at the turn, waiting to see what she would do. Not Eli, too slight. Not Kara, too tall. The shape shifted, almost a whisper. Then the stairwell revealed Hallie, hair tucked, running shoes, face flushed from loops. You don't want to hear the last verse, Hallie said softly. It makes you answer. Answer what? Lena asked as if it would help. Anything, Hallie said. Whatever you have too much of. You sing it out, and this place keeps it. They stood shoulder to shoulder on the B landing and listened to the air, making itself useful. Hallie's breath matched the knot choir for a second. Then she caught herself and changed her rhythm like sliding one foot to the other to break a curse. Rule of thumb, Hallie murmured. If you feel smart while climbing, you're about to be punished. If you feel stupid, you're probably doing it right. Lena laughed because Hallie had the gift of making rules sound like jokes and jokes like rules. The chalk comma at her feet looked blasphemous. She rubbed it with the side of her shoe until it blurred. The little thanks held on like a decision. From the laundry room, a dryer thunked. A machine's belt coughed. Someone's socks adopted electricity and clung. The building coughed back, and on that cough, for half a second, the air laid words over breath. Nothing lovely, worse than a tune, a phrase being tuned, ironed, not finished. Don't hum, and then it gone. The way you hear your name in the hiss of water, and then decide you made it up. Come up with me, Hallie said. Don't stay for the end. Puts teeth on you. They climbed together. Lena counted the way Eli had taught her. Quiet, sternum, breath as metronome. Hallie ran like a person who knew the angles. On 2, the window showed a small rectangle of sky the color of a bruise that was almost done being a bruise. On 3, the window showed a different year's snow. On 4, her hallway waited with the hydrangea in a plastic pitcher and the sound of someone's television laughing far away. In 4C, Journal had shoved her paw under the utility door until half her forearm disappeared. When Lena scooped her up, the cat's fur carried the smell of the stairwell, brick and cold. You're not coming, Lena told her. Journal blinked as if to say, I already did. The postcard on the fridge had curled at the edges. The sentence on the back, if you are on an even floor at night, do not hum on the stairs, looked slightly darker, like someone had rewritten it over itself with a sure hand. She took the torn ledger page out of the freezer and held it under the bulb. Frost receded from the fibers like nervous breath. The small crossed outline, if you leave your window open, you'll hear the choir at 3, had blurred more with thaw. Under it, the smaller don't count out loud had held. On the way to the museum, she found Marchand in the mailroom, cane hooked over his arm, holding a letter to the light like he could see back through the decades if he tried hard enough. You went down at 3, he said, not a question. I stood at the line, she said. I didn't cross. Good, he said, and looked pleased in the particular way old men look pleased when someone else has kept a rule that cost them. Tell me what you heard. Breath that wanted to be a chord, she said, and discipline, and an invitation. My mouth wanted to join. Never, he said softly. Never meet the building halfway. You make it come to you. He tapped his cane once on the tile. You want to be generous. Put Basil on the landing. Basil, she said, sure he was having fun at her expense. The blue hates green, he said. Even the kitchen kind. She brought the basil plant down that afternoon, clipped 2 leaves, and laid them at the bottom riser by the green-blue line. The air felt briefly pleased with itself, like a room that has been complimented and doesn't know how to stand. When she returned in the evening, 1 leaf had dried flat as paper and trapped itself under the edge of a scuffed tread, like a pressed thing in a book. That night at 3, when she stayed in her bed out of obedience, the whisper in the voice memo changed. It said we count, and it did not sound like her. Chapter 5, The Blue Line. Eli found her in the lobby the next morning, grunting over a plastic tub of coarse rock salt. Weather service, says Flurries. We get ice on the back steps, we get lawsuits. Blue hates green, Lena said, because Marchand's advice had rolled around in her head all night, a marble traveling the same groove until the groove had become a sentence. Eli looked up, then down at her hands, which still wore a bloom of chalk she had not noticed. You've been down past the laundry door, he said. I didn't cross, she said. I put basil at the line. He suppressed a smile, so fast it looked like a wince. If you talk to Marchand, you get recipes, he said. He paused, as if deciding where to put the next word. You want the real rule? Don't make it a project. It's already a project, she said. It started without me. Then you need a second person, he said. Always climb with someone who can be rude to you. Polite people follow you down. She thought of Hallie, who could be rude with grace. She thought of Gabe, with his delivery bag and the specific teenage shrug that says I will do anything as long as it makes a story. She thought of Kara's cat in a grocery bag. Journal headbutt her shin. Come, Eli said, lowering his voice like a conspirator. I'll show you something I never show. He led her around the corner to a service alcove where a strip of the original tile still held on, a border of green leaves, black like seeds. He pulled a rag off a caged light. Inside the cage, wired to the bulb, someone had tied a ribbon of faded blue cloth, the kind you get from a wedding favor or a hospital nursery. You keep it here? Lena asked. Blue, he said, amused.
No.
I keep this here. The building keeps the other thing wherever it wants. But this helps. He tugged the ribbon once, a check, not an offering. Old Super taught me, he said. Mark the lights with something the blue will leave alone. We tried copper wire. We tried garlic. The blue likes garlic because it thinks it's funny. The ribbon's too much of a marriage for it to stomach. What happened to the old Super? She asked. He took a mirror down to check the smear on his cheek, Eli said. Now he's a rumor. Ask Marchand. He writes better endings than I do. She found Hallie by listening for rubber soles and breath. Hallie had made a practice of looping the building at odd hours like it was the park she had been deprived of. You want to go down, Hallie said, a generosity, not an accusation. Not past the line, Lena said. Not blue. I need your rudeness. Hallie laughed. You a cop? You a priest? You can't say need to me like that. I need you to tell me no if I get smart. Good, Hallie said. I can do that for free. They met Gabe on 2, because of course they did. He hovered like a person whose day was a set of open tabs. The building was one of them. Group climb, he said, mock solemn. Do I sign a waiver? You sign your name if we make it back, Hallie said. In what? Gabe asked, and Hallie snapped. Ink. In a way that made him grin without pretending to be cool about it. They brought chalk. Hallie brought a spool of bricklayer's line from a hardware store bag. Not rope, she said. Rope makes the building proud. Thread annoys it. They tied the brick line to the rail at 1-2 knots. Gabe clipped his delivery bag's carabiner through the line as if it could do anything about time. Lena put a basil leaf in her pocket because if a recipe is going to be part of your new physics, you might as well cook. On B, green paint. The arrow to the cages. The soda machine that never vends the thing you choose. The white line on the concrete telling heads to mind themselves. Beyond, where the wall met floor, that insult blue where someone had once painted everything lower to make it washable. The blue went on around the corner to the far door. The air pressed itself along the wall, thin and enthusiastic. Hallie set the spool on the landing and fed the line out with a gloved hand. Gabe took the line in his. Lena made the first mark in chalk on the lowest riser before the blue, a pale square. Hallie made the second on the wall itself, waist high, as if drawing a threshold. Count, she said, in bone. They walked the corridor between the wash of green and the insult blue the way you walk a neighbor's property line. Hands to themselves, eyes on the feet, aware of the house watching. Lena turned her head to look at the soda machine and admonished herself for wanting to. Gabe said, "Is blue a person?" in a whisper, then flinched because his own voice made the ceiling feel too close. At the far corner, the air grew colder. The line of blue paint rose as the floor sloped down. A door with a hasp stood partway open. On it, a placard in a font nobody uses anymore. Storage D. Eli had not said anything about D. The letter felt like an extra tooth in a jaw that should have stopped.
Don't, Hallie said.
I know, Lena said. Gabe took another step, because Gabe is a teenager in the part of any man where you get dared by gravity and make it your job to say yes. Hallie put a flat hand on his chest. Hard. The way you'll stop a stranger from stepping backward into traffic. Don't, she repeated. Gabe nodded, so honestly it made the air give them a second's grace. They stood there, 3 of them, like people at the boundary of a creek deciding whether to cross and which boots were allowed to get wet. The brick line lay against the baseboard like a taut, patient snake. Lena's chalk mark on the last safe riser waited without romance. From behind storage, D came a sound. Not choir, not breath. A scrape like a chair being moved in a far room where nobody should be, followed by the low-material complaint of wood that remembers every person who ever sat on it. We're done, Hallie said, as if they were in a restaurant and the service had been rude. Back. They walked the line back, Gabe holding the spool now, paying it in with neat flicks, Hallie's palm flat on Lena's shoulder, just enough to be rude if necessary. At the turn, the air remembered to be warmer. At the white line on concrete, Lena felt the pressure in her cheeks release. At B, they stood and breathed, and the stairwell agreed to be a place you could say no to. On the way up, on 2, they met Marchand with his cane, bent to pick up a fallen flyer. Yoga with Marisol had slid half out of its pushpin. D is not for you, he said without looking up. D is for the things the building buried and forgot to feel bad about. What's in D? Gabe asked, because he is rude, but usefully.
People, Marchand said.
Of course. What else do buildings bury? Also bicycles. Bicycles? Hallie demanded, offended. 2 nice 3-speeds from 1974, Marchand said. And the old Super's mirror. Is he? Lena started. No, Marchand said. He is not in D. Don't look in D to find anyone. That is the first insult of the blue. It makes you believe you can get back what you dropped. They climbed to 4, counted breaths, chalk marks living under their eyes, the spool in Gabe's hand now small. The hydrangea in the plastic pitcher in Lena's hallway looked smug. Inside 4C, Journal lay pressed against the utility door, the side of her face chalked faintly white as if she had slept in flour. When Lena picked her up, blue dust fell from her paws. Not paint. Not. Something about the same color, yes, but older than paint, more like the shadow of a swimming pool in a photograph that time had thought better of. Lena wiped the dust onto a damp paper towel and folded it over like evidence. She slid it under the freezer magnet with the eggplant pizza. The magnet looked heavy for once, like it had decided to take its job. There was a note under her front door, written on the back of an advertisement for a locksmith. Do not bring her.
No signature. No apartment.
The ink the same blue as the dust. Her throat tried to hum. She told it no. She went to the museum jittery. The dinosaur tail looked smug. Minerva offered her a coffee that tasted like wet paper and sugar. You look climbed, Minerva said. I live in a building that wants to meet me halfway, Lena said. Tell it to come up here, Minerva said. We have bulletproof glass. Lena looked at the monitors, the long empty corridors, the closed special exhibit, a sculpture hanging from wires that insisted it was not a mobile, and saw a reflection in the security glass on the monitor for gallery. Herself, the little room behind her, her hands. And behind that, not in the room and not in the monitor, and not anywhere physical she could label, a narrow stair curling down with the delicate wrongness of a woodcut. It flickered. It disappeared. When she got home at dawn, there was chalk on her doormat again, smaller than any hand she knew. Left at 3. Under it, an arrow toward the stairwell. Under that, as if after thought. We do not take cats. She wiped the words away. Then, guiltily, she wrote counted very small where the tile met the threshold, and immediately scuffed it with her heel, embarrassed to have made any building answer a call it might enjoy. At 10 o'clock, Eli knocked. 2 knocks, a pause, 1 knock. We're changing a valve, he said. Kill your water for an hour. He looked past her shoulder into the living room the way supers do, when they need to see if you're burning candles. His gaze snagged on the utility door, on the draft coming under it, on the cat hair caught in the draft. "Don't bring her," he said, as if he had written the note. "I don't make rules about animals, but I'll make this one. Don't bring the cat where the blue can see." "It leaves notes," she said. "Or someone does. It says we now." "We isn't the blue," he said. "We is the building. Learn to like it less. That's how you stay." He left her standing with a basil cutting and a jam jar on the sill, the chalk in its bowl, the paper towel under the eggplant magnet, Journal staring at her with eyes that had learned geometry, and the feeling in her throat like the first half of a hum. She texted Hallie, "Tonight?" Hallie replied with a running shoe emoji and a middle finger. Gabe sent a ghost. At 1:06, they met on 1. Hallie tied the brick line again, this time tighter. Gabe stuck a basil leaf to the wall with a piece of blue painter's tape that made the whole stair quiver in front of Lena's eyes in a way that suggested the building hadn't decided whether to be insulted or flattered. At B, the blue line waited. Past the green, at the lip of Storage D, the air had the flavor of the ocean you think about when you are too inland and want to remember. They did not cross. On the landing, chalk marks from someone else had appeared, for thin dashes and a diagonal, like a child's notation. Under them, a smaller mark, H. Hallie crouched and touched it with 2 fingers. Her breath took a direction. "Not me," she said. "Then who?" Gabe whispered, already more in love with the problem than was good for him. "We'll ask tomorrow," Hallie said. "Tonight we count." They counted. They walked the line back. On 2, Marchand, insomniac or sentinel, nodded once like a clerk. On 4, the hydrangea kept its lie. Behind Lena's utility door, air pressed at the gap like a visitor who has decided to be polite forever. When she finally slept, Journal wedged herself into the hollow behind Lena's knees and kept her spine honest. In the morning, a new postcard with no stamp sat on the rug inside the door. A photograph of the Fennel's roof in 1922 for men in caps standing on a parapet, the city soft behind them like a rumor. On the back, in the same neat hand as the first, "Do not carry a mirror. Do not count out loud. Do not bring her." Then, smaller like an apology, "You can leave basil." Lena put the new card on the fridge next to the first. She looked at the utility door and thought of blue paint and bicycles and a mirror belonging to a man who wasn't anywhere you could look. She thought of "We do not take cats" and felt something like gratitude and something like insult share the couch in her chest. "I won't bring you," she told Journal. The cat sneezed, aggrieved, and bumped her head into Lena's knee like a stamp of acceptance. She wrote "counted" very small under the eggplant magnet. She erased it again immediately, because the building liked to be thanked, and that was a habit she did not intend to feed. Chapter 6: Mirrors and Other Mouths. The building began returning her generosity the way old places do, with an etiquette of traps. On Monday, someone slid a gift through Lena's mail slot, a compact nickel case, hinge intact. No note. On the lid, the Fennel in an Art Deco script like a smirk. She turned it over in her hand, thumb on the clasp, felt the hinge's suggestion. She put it on the counter next to the eggplant magnet and put a dish towel over it as if that could make an idea less sharp. In 3B, the housekeeper's cart tipped and a hand mirror slid across the hall like a fish. In 7E, a medicine cabinet door swung open on its own so gently the pipes hid their laugh. The elevator's brass had learned to gleam more eagerly when you looked back to check your hair. "Stop shining everything," Lena told the lobby, and Eli, who was replacing the bulb over the vestibule with the slow devotion of men who refused to fall off ladders, said, "You talk to architecture like it's your sister."
"It started it," she said.
He looked at the dish towel bulge on the counter and the security camera and shook his head so minutely it might have been a draft. Marchand told her a story in the mailroom because that room is where stories go when they need scales measured. "H," he said, tapping the corkboard with his cane, on a space where a lost cat, gray, opinionated, flyer had curled at the corners. Her name was Heloise, H for short. She wrote the first chalk marks that mattered. She drew lines where the stairs remembered to be stairs. She left basil leaves like ransoms. And once she brought a mirror because she had a smear on her cheek she couldn't abide. What happened to her? Gabe asked, because he had come for packages and stayed for gossip, backpack half open like a bird. She stepped onto one and looked down to see if her shoe was untied. Marchand said. The stairwell obliged. She fell downward through 3 floors that were not 3 floors and landed on laundry like a woman dropping in from another story entirely. She stood up. She was fine. She was very angry that the smear was still there. She went back up, tried again, and we never saw her face again. He looked at Lena. Do not let the building teach you to approve of its sense of humor. That night the elevator had a tantrum and made the bell ding every time any floor pressed the button, which meant the whole building learned the rhythms of its neighbor's indecision. At 1 o'clock, the ding became a metronome for the knot choir, which the stairwell threw back at them in breaths. On even floors, the windows dulled like rabbit eyes. Phones count as mirrors, Hallie said, catching Lena in the hall with her screen up because her sister was texting pictures of the new cat bed. Put it away before you even think about the stairs. It's not glass, Lena said. It reflects your mouth when you think you're quiet, Hallie said, and took the phone and shoved it in Lena's coat pocket with a rudeness so efficient it qualified as care. Bring the ribbon. They hung blue ribbons around caged bulbs because Eli had left a spool on purpose in a cupboard that said mops. They tied one to the banister on B, where the blue line did its insult against the green. They tied one to the rail opposite storage D, and the knot made the air push back like a cat who resents furniture being moved. You really think marriage scares color? Gabe said, skeptical but obedient, looping ribbon through the guard of the soda machine and tying a bow with a flourish he'd learned at some birthday shift. Blue hates promises, Hallie said. It wants you to improvise your way downward. At 3 o'clock, the air again made a throat of itself. The knot choir braided. This time the tone shaped itself into something perilously like a call and response, a foolish church in a city that did not earn one. A phrase lifted 3 notes, then a lower step. Hallie's head cocked. Lena felt her teeth answer, without her permission. Gabe hummed, just once. So soft the cat 2 floors up lifted an ear. Hey, Hallie snapped, palms sharp against a shoulder.
No.
Sorry, Gabe said, cheeks hot, and sank his mouth into his scarf like a boy at mass who has been caught trying to taste the wine. It's like when someone says your name in the supermarket, he muttered. You answer even if it's a different mother. Don't, Hallie said. This building will raise you without your parents if you let it. They stood on B, polite as people loitering in a lobby where loitering is a rule. Lena held the basil leaf in her pocket and rolled it between forefinger and thumb. The smell made the air sulk. Beneath storage D, something readjusted itself. Chair leg again. With complaint, the uneasy sigh of bicycle tires going from weightless to weighted, and then back to memory. Do we ever go in? Gabe whispered. No, Hallie said reflexively, like a Catholic who has set all the statues back on their shelves.
She softened.
Maybe with linen and a mouthful of salt. Maybe to take one thing back that the building won't miss. But not because you want to prove you're brave. Lena didn't say anything. She thought of the old super's mirror, not because she wanted it. She wanted it removed, destroyed, made humble by the indignities we pay to dangerous objects. She thought of the bicycles. She thought of H's chalk marks, diagonal, small. She thought of the chalk comma she had wiped off and of how the tiny word thanks had held in spite of her foot. The knot choir drew breath as one. The stairwell lowered its head like a bull deciding whether to charge. At the end of the phrase, the air said, not quite out loud, not with vowels, answer me. Lena swallowed. Her throat tried compliance. She bit her cheek until her eyes watered. Gabe made a small almost sound, and Hallie flicked his ear.
No.
No, Lena said, but she said it inwardly, to her own mouth, a refusal more than a word, a rule rather than a reply. At 3:11 the building got bored or tired or somebody on 5E flushed a toilet, and the plumbing took offense, and the knot choir fell apart like a rehearsal with no conductor. At 3:14 the elevator remembered self-esteem and dinged once as if to say, you are not the only instrument we own. They climbed. In the hall, Lena's doormat had been chalked again, small letters, sideways like a person writing from a pocket. Leave it wrapped. Under it, very small, H. H. Hallie said slowly, crouching, finger 2 inches above the chalk. That's her hand. You said she was. Not a ghost, Hallie said sharply, standing. Don't make it small on purpose. The building keeps people the way it keeps fixtures. She is here like a safety pin is here. So we wrap it, Lena said, not saying mirror. If we bring anything up, we wrap it. Wrap your mouth first, Hallie muttered, but she wasn't saying no. In 4C, Journal slept belly up in defiance of anything that wanted to claim danger. The compact on the counter sat under its towel with the silence of an object choosing charm as a weapon. Lena carried it to the freezer and put it behind the frozen peas, as if that could teach reflection humility. She held a length of ribbon in her fist until her palms smelled like dust. On the utility landing, the ledger sat under its own thin skin of air. She did not touch it. She put the ribbon on the railing and tied it into a clumsy knot. When she turned to go back up, a voice very close to her ear said, pleasantly, almost apologetically, "Do not count out loud." She didn't. She climbed. When she reached the living room, the basil on the windowsill had leaned an inch toward the door. That day at the museum, a woman pressed her face to the glass over the mummy like someone trying to remember a song, and her breath fogged the case in a circle the exact size of the compact under Lena's dish towel. No mirrors, Lena said, reflex, to no one who had asked. Minerva said, "You all right?" And Lena said, "I won't bring the cat." And Minerva said, "Great," and handed her a donut that tasted like agreement. Chapter 7. A small theft performed politely. They chose a night with a snow warning because snow makes cities honest and slows chaos down enough to negotiate. They brought linen, a pillowcase, a dish towel, a tablecloth filched from the community room in the basement that hadn't hosted a community in 3 years. They brought brickline, blue ribbon, chalk, a tin of salt stolen from Marchand's kitchen while he looked stern in a way that permitted it. "Trade if you can," Marchand said. "If you take, you leave, even if it's dumb. Blue is less mean if you make it feel like commerce." "Leave what?" Gabe asked, inventorying his pockets like a boy confessing to his mother. "Your worst habit," Marchand said. "Failing that, a bottle cap." The three of them met at 1:02 because early is a promise the Fennel respects. Hallie tied line to rail, taut, double knotted. Lena tucked the pillowcase under her arm. Gabe produced a roll of painter's tape and taped a basil leaf to his chest like a scout badge. Their breath made 3 honest clouds in the cold. On B, the blue and the green argued along the wall like a marriage in public. The air was cold enough to render pride into something you could see. The storage D placard watched them like a teacher. "We do not cross," Hallie said. "Right," Lena said. "We do not cross. We stand here. We reach in. We take the smallest possible thing and leave the smallest possible courtesy." Gabe held the end of the brick line like a leash. Hallie fed it out slowly, and the bobbing of the slack looked like a heartbeat at the edge of the ridiculous. Lena backed to the very edge of the green's jurisdiction and leaned until her shoulder blades understood architecture. She slid the dish towel under storage D's lip with the kind of respect a person gives a sleeping dog. With the tip of the towel, she coaxed something toward her, any something, the kind the blue would least miss. Dust, a bolt, the loose ring from an old zipper. The linen made a small whisper. The whisper traveled. The stairwell sent it back with interest. Behind the door came again the scrape of chair leg, calm, as if whatever was on the other side of blue had adjusted to give them room to fail. The linen caught on something small and round and sturdier than dust. Lena didn't lift. She slid slow. A tiny bell rolled out onto the concrete, the kind that belongs on a bicycle's handlebar, nickel-pitted, clapper stubborn. She felt the idea of triumph rise in her throat and hated it on sight. "Trade," Marchand had said. Lena took the salt and poured a line across the blue, not touching, just above, like a parallel rule. "For the bell," she said, which was foolish but felt necessary. She took from her pocket the bottle cap she'd put there for exactly this job. Cheap beer, dented, and slid it under the gap with a push of the dish towel. For your trouble, she added, and hated how quickly she'd said it. The blue took the cap. Not visibly. But the air eased an increment. The ribbon on the rail stopped trembling. Back, Hallie said softly. Back, back, back. They walked the brick line home like a dog that had decided not to chase. On two, Marchand stood with his cane and looked at the bell as if he recognized its pitting. Who did you rob? He asked mildly. Whoever owned a 3-speed in 1974, Hallie said. We left a cap. A cap is not a bell, Marchand said, but his mouth softened like a man remembering a bicycle in the summer when bodies worked without complaint. Ring it later. Not here. Not at 3. Back on 4, the hydrangea pretended not to notice Lena carrying contraband. In 4C, Journal sat under the utility door with eyes like an argument. Lena set the bell on the table and covered it with the pillowcase and did not lift the cloth because her hands had the itch of surfaces. She tied the pillowcase shut with ribbons so Blue had to mind its manners if it wanted to get in. They waited until noon, because noon is the least haunted time in a building that prays at 3. They gathered in Lena's living room, Hallie with coffee, Gabe with adolescent awe, Marchand with his cane and blue ribbon in his pocket, like a man entering an unpromising ceremony. Eli came at the last second with a screwdriver and the smell of pipe joints on his jacket. The bell goes by the service entrance, he said. On a hook. You don't ring it for fun. You ring it if somebody you love gets lost and needs a noise the stairwell can't translate. Lena untied the ribbon and peeled back the pillowcase. The bell lay innocently under the linen like a coin under a napkin trick. She picked it up with 2 fingers like she had never had fingers before. It was cold in the manner of basements, not in the manner of metaphysics. The clapper looked handmade. There was a tiny H scratched in its side. Hallie went very still. She left marks on everything she wanted back, she said. We'll put it where she can find it if the building allows it, Eli said firmly, because he understood mercy in a way that had nothing to do with miracles. They hung the bell by the service door, 3 screws, a ribbon folded under the plate like a blessing. The bell did not ring. They left it alone because you must. At 3 o'clock that night, the knock choir was on time. The breath, many breaths, braided. The stairwell's windows tried to be good or tried to be weather. Storage breathed like a dog behind a gate. Lena stood at B with her hands in her coat pockets like a person who intends to refuse a sale twice and then say yes if the salesman is funny. The bell rang once on its own, not loud, just enough to draw the air into a different shape. The knock choir faltered and rethreaded. The stairwell waited. Something under the utility door in 4C lifted its head and resettled on its paws. Lena's doormat held a word at dawn, chalked tiny like handwriting in church. Left. Under it, thank you. Under that, in even smaller letters like a person learning to conserve chalk. H. She bought new basil. She set it on the sill. She stared at the compact under the dish towel and told it, out loud, not for you. And the towel managed to look offended. In the mailroom, tucked into an envelope with no stamp, a 3rd postcard waited. A photograph of the Fennel stairwell in 1930, just after painting. The green so new it looked like a promise. In the corner, a woman's shadow against the rail, hat tilted, chin not visible. On the back, in that neat hand, if you must go down with someone rude. If you must bring something up, wrap it in ribbon. If you must answer, write your word instead of saying it. Then, as if after much hesitation, I am not a ghost.
Stop saying it. Ash.
That night Lena wrote on the stairwell wall above B, small, under the chalk marks H had left. Counted. She drew a basil leaf next to it. Badly, an anatomy of green. She didn't scuff it away. She waited to see if the building would learn to be grateful, without practicing ownership. On 2, Marchand was waiting with a folded length of ribbon and a question on his face. Does it get easier? He asked. No, Lena said. It gets stricter. Good, he said, as if relieved of the burden of advice. Bring the bell to the roll, he added, and then corrected himself, because there was no roll here. Ring it once a week, because ceremonies are how we remember instead of having to believe.
Sunday noon, Hallie said.
Before Marisol's yoga that no one attends.
Perfect, Ellie grunted.
I love a schedule. Gabe lifted the bell from its hook gently and rang it once, as if checking a child's hand for fever. The sound went up the stairwell, like a line the blue could not bend. Storage decomplained. Then the complaint made itself smaller, as if practicing becoming a clause. See, Gabe said softly, as if to himself. We're not stairs. We just go down sometimes. Journal sneezed behind the utility door. The dish towel jumped on the counter as if the compact had pushed back from underneath, and the basil on the sill threw a faint new scent the building could not translate. The night had not been solved. It had been taught a rule, and somewhere under the blue paint, where the bicycles napped and a mirror thought about an old hand, a woman scratched a small H on concrete with a pin and stood up as if that's what standing is for. Chapter 8. What Mirrors Want.
The bell behaved.
The blue sulked. The snow that the weather service had promised put a white lint on the fennel's cornices and turned the alley into a rehearsal for February. Lena moved the compact from the freezer to the highest kitchen cabinet, as if altitude could teach it manners. She put the dish towel back over it, added a second, linen this time a little fancy. Journal sat on the counter and regarded the cabinet with a flat skepticism cats learn in old buildings. We are not looking, Lena told her, as much to herself. At noon Sunday, Eli rang the bell with a single patient nod. Sound climbed the well like a thread through a needle. Marchand stood beside him in a coat older than Gabe, the ribbon folded into his glove. Hallie arrived late, hair wet, cheeks hot, carrying 2 paper cups that steamed in the stairwell air like apologies. Ceremony, Marchand said, every syllable approving of the stupid, wholly human instinct to make schedules for ghosts. We remember because we ring, not because we want to be rewarded. Blue hates Sundays, Hallie added. Too many promises. At 15:10, the compact fell. There was a thunk like a book dropped flat. The dish towels slid after it like flags giving up. The little case bounced once on the parquet and came to rest against the baseboard with its lid slightly ajar. It had opened enough to show a sliver of something that was not glass and not. The light in the room changed, not brighter, not darker, sharper, like winter on the tongue. Journal made a sound that meant no, and leapt onto the windowsill hard enough to knock Basil into a lean that felt like a vote. Lena didn't look. She picked up the pillowcase they'd used for the bell. She put it over the compact the way you cover a child's birdcage during a thunderstorm. Linen muffled the sharpness in the light, but not all the way. The room still wore an edge. The door tapped. Hallie didn't wait for an answer. She never did. She stepped in, saw the tented shape against the baseboard, swore like a saint who believes in punctuation, and shut the door with her heel. We don't look, she said, already hauling ribbon from her pocket. We wrap, we walk, we return. Not at 3, Lena said. We don't give anything to Blue at 3. Midnight, Hallie said. Early. The building likes early. I'll get Eli. You get salt. Eli arrived with a solemnity he reserved for valves and weddings. He knelt, and the kneel cost him, and tied the ribbon around the pillowcase in a square not a scout would envy. Don't let it show itself even once, he said, voice low enough to be a hum if rules allowed. You show it manners. It thinks it can be a guest. Lena poured salt onto the ribbon like a child trying to make a picture. Trade, she remembered, and put a basil leaf under the knot. The leaf looked absurd. The knot looked like prayer. Gabe, Hallie said, already in the hall, her tread that efficient rudeness that made the building respect her. Bring tape. Bring the line. Bring your mouth shut. They went down in a procession the stairwell did not deserve. Eli at the rail, hand to the ribbon he'd strung weeks ago, the square knots looking back at him like good dogs, Hallie ahead with the brick line, feeding it as if she were the one generous thing in the building, Gabe behind, one hand on Lena's shoulder to be rude if needed. Lena carried the wrapped compact like you carry medicine you don't trust. Her throat invented a tune out of reflex. She bit her cheek until she tasted iron and wrote an O on the inside of her mouth with her teeth. On 2, Marchand stood like a witness in a corridor, cane angled, ribbon coiled, eyes the color bureaucracy should have chosen. He didn't join them. This was not his job, but he tapped his cane once on the tile as they passed, a count Lena added to her breath. At B, the blue held itself like a boy at a dance who thinks the rules were designed to insult him. Storage D breathed. The ribbon tied to the rail trembled once, and then steadied. The basil leaf on the knot smelled green where no green should be. Lena crouched the way villains crouch in fairy tales. She was not a villain, and the building was not a tale, but folklore prefers posture. Trade, she said aloud and then corrected herself. She wrote trade on the concrete with the chalk, because H had said, if you must answer, write your word. She slid the pillowcase under the door until blue touched linen. The air pushed back like lips against cloth. The blue didn't know what to do with ribbon. It knew a marriage when it tasted one, and did not care to chew. The pillowcase went light. It went empty in the particular weightlessness that happens when something that wanted to be looked at has been denied its witness. Lena pulled the linen back. Nothing inside. A thin frost of dust on the hem that stuck to her fingers and felt like a breath that had been saved for too long. Hallie fed the line in and drew it out, slow, like fishing for a reasonable fish. Leave something, she said without turning around. Lena set a bottle cap under the gap. Cheap beer, dented. It slid out of sight with no drama. Accepted coin that bought nothing. She wrote thank you under trade, because sometimes you practice bad habits, hoping the hostile angel will call it charm. Blue sulked. The stairwell eased an increment, precise as a thermostat. On the far side of D, a chair leg scuffed again. A woman's voice, a woman who has gone 30 years without singing on purpose, said, almost laughing, almost scolding, stop saying ghost. H, Hallie breathed, and that was all the building allowed. They walked the line back. Eli didn't look satisfied. He preferred outcomes he could grease, but his shoulders unhooked. Gabe exhaled a laugh, so small it didn't count as music. At 2, Marchand put 2 fingers to his temple, like a private salute to anyone old enough to remember false bottom drawers. In 4C, Lena shook the pillowcase out over the sink and washed the dust off her hands until salt stung the small wounds her teeth had made in her cheek. Journal sniffed the linen and tucked her paw under it like an animal claiming the only reasonable corner. On Lena's doormat at dawn. Left again, and then good in a different hand. Straighter, smaller, a clerk's hand. Under that, a bell drawn badly. She left it unscuffed all day. A postcard to herself. A decision inked in chalk. By evening, the fennel had learned to behave in the polite way that means it hasn't forgiven you, but respects your schedule. The elevator came when called. The radiator sang the small rust hymn of winter. A smell of garlic drifted like gossip under the hall door and made the blue flare indignantly in Lena's mind even from B. Garlic's a joke, she told the wall. We know what you like. The museum was a relief. Boring, bright, accountable. She watched a guard scratch his ear in the reflection of a case and looked away before the movement reminded her of glass. Minerva told her a story about a man who tried to tip a dinosaur. The monitors showed exactly, and only what they were pointing at. When she came home, Eli had fastened a small brass hook high on the service door frame and hung the pillowcase there by its corner. Ribbons still knotted. A reminder, he said when she caught him at the tool cart. So, we don't invent courage again when we mean care. You keep our we small, Lena said. That's what supers do, he said. We says throw a party. I says move your car. That night, at 3, the knock choir braided and did not ask for a reply. Lena lay on the couch and felt something in the building admit they had given back the mouth that wanted to be looked at. Her phone recorded 10 minutes of nothing on the kitchen counter and then one word at the end, counted, in a voice that was not hers anymore and also was, she had ceded the word to the building on purpose, the way you give a child a spoon and call that helping. The next morning, a delivery, Gabe, brought up a box with new chalk, blue ribbon, a spool of brickline Hallie had sourced, and a plant pot with basil already sulking in it. On the side of the box, someone had written in marker, large, as if telling the building where to file this order. Tools, not gifts. Did you hum? Hallie asked him, taking the spool like a baton. Only in my hair, he said. I wrote an O and bit my cheek. I think I'm a Catholic now. Be whatever keeps you alive, she said, which is what priests say without the jokes. On B, a new chalk mark had appeared overnight. Not H's diagonal. Not Lena's tidy block. A child's dash at ankle height, the kind of mark a person makes when standing with one foot on the riser and a chalk nub pinched in a glove.
Under it, C.
Kara, Lena said, who told me regret looks like hair. Hallie looked angry for a fast second and then just tired. We have to start leaving a pencil in a cup like a guest book, and I hate how much that makes sense. Let them write, Lena said. It's when they sing I worry. That afternoon, there was a paper slipped under Lena's door, the kind of paper you get from a pad hanging by a phone, lined, feathery at the edges. The writing in blue ink was careful, the careful of a person whose hand used to be steadier. My husband thinks I am laughing in my sleep, it said. Tell him I am not. Tell him to stop humming when he shaves.
Sette.
She wrote back on the same page, careful not to make a ceremony of it, because bureaucracy is what you do when you refuse to invent new gods. We won't let him. Later today, I'll knock at 7E with basil and ribbon. Do not bring mirrors into the hall. For see, she taped the note to the molding with blue painter's tape in the hope of insulting the blue where it couldn't see. At 1800 hours, in daylight, polite, Hallie and Lena went to 7E with a basil cutting in a jam jar and blue ribbon already tied around the jar's neck like a bridesmaid who will not be in the photos. A man in socks with good posture opened the door. He had the half smile of someone about to charm a saleswoman and close a deal. Behind him, Kara sat cross-legged on the rug, eyes sharp, cat asleep upon her lap like a well-placed weight. We're the stair people, Hallie said. You don't hum when you shave. That's the whole pitch. The man's smile fell off in a way that made him likable. She told you, he said. I thought she was inventing a religion. She is, Hallie said deadpan. It's called staying. Basil is sacrament. Ribbon is heresy. Don't ask what the bell is. Kara stroked the cat's spine with 2 fingers, a gratitude. Midnight, she said softly. They asked last night. What did you answer? Lena asked, because the only rule she could stand to break lately was the one about not asking. I swallowed it, Kara said, pride bright as offense. It tasted like nails, and I swallowed it. Good, Hallie said. That's how we keep the mouth. Don't be generous with your voice. They left the basil. They left a list that looked like a recipe. It was rules. They left the ribbon on the jar, so the blue could talk to it and get indigestion. They left Kara and the husband learning to say no in the mirror. At 3 that night, the knot choir braided and stopped at the 3rd phrase, surprised, perhaps, by a neighborhood where too many women had decided that their mouths were furniture owned by the family. The stairwell windows went dull. The elevator rang once and thought better of attention. The bell on the service door stayed quiet, which is what bells should do most days. On Lena's phone, after 10 minutes of room tone, the whisper arrived like a receipt printed carefully. We count. It was not a demand. It was policy. Chapter 9. The procession that chose to return. The first real cold always makes pipes speak like old people. A week into the new regime of ribbon and salt and not answering, the fennel caught the tone. The radiators him lost keys. Something in the back stair dropped temperature too fast. Something wanted to crack and be done with it. At 0:37, a text from Eli. Leak on 3 back hall. Tenants out. Walk 3 down, elevator sulking. Attached, a photo of water trying to become more than itself under a light fixture that didn't deserve it. Up is down, Hallie said when Lena forwarded the text, fingers already in her running shoes. Bring the bell. Bring the line. Bring Marchand if he'll admit to being useful. Marchand admitted, offended and pleased, both in equal measure. He appeared at one with a coil of ribbon and a wool cap set at a tilt that made him look like his grandmother's nephew. Gabe arrived chewing gum like penance and wearing a neon vest he'd found in a closet, which gave his urgency bureaucratic authority it didn't deserve. They set out a procession without calling it one. Hallie went ahead with brick line on her hip, knotting it to rails at each landing so the building would have to show its face if it wanted to trip her. Lena wore the bell at her belt by a short ribbon, ridiculous and correct. Marchand counted breaths out loud once, reflex. and then caught himself and scribbled 1, 2, 3 on his palm in blue ballpoint. Gabe carried towels and dignity, which is to say, very little and everything. The third-floor neighbor, 3A, was Mr. Rawlings, an old man with knees a generation older than himself. The burst pipe had put a sheen of dangerous on the hall that no salt could repair. His door stood open, the smell of wet plaster busy in the air. He had dressed for the street in a sweater that appealed to the 80s to be brave on his behalf. Eli had him sitting on a dining chair, like a throne that had learned to apologize. "We will carry you down," Hallie said, practical and not polite. "We will not stop in the wrong lobby. We will not hum." "I don't hum," Mr. Rawlings said, affronted. "I was in the Navy." "You will not count out loud," Marchand added. "You will breathe and do what women tell you." Gabe and Eli took the chair by front and back. Lena went ahead, bell quiet in her hand. Hallie walked backward, reading the faces of the steps like a card sharp who knows when decks have been edged. The hall smelled like a speed that had been slowed. The hydrangea in its plastic pitcher watched them pass with a fake flowers unearned smirk. The stairwell saw the procession and remembered church. It threw open its lungs and offered a chord like a compliment. Lena's throat tried to answer. She bit her cheek. The bell knocked lightly against her thigh and made a breath of sound. Metal thinking about music and then declining. The note sat on the step like a coin. On 2, Kara opened her door and stood with her cat like a saint with a puma. "Do you need hands?" she asked. "We need witnesses," Marchand said, and she nodded and set her palm to the rail with that particular seriousness of the newly devout. On 1, a door to lobby that wasn't theirs breathed like something behind it had warmer lights. The placard on the wall, "Exit," flashed the green that means run but not safety. A second door 2 turns below said laundry/storage and coughed blue at them like a boy trying to impress girls with his cigarette. "Lobby now, not laundry," Hallie said, ruder than necessary and therefore correct. They opened 1. The lobby did not reward them with their furniture. It presented tile from another decade. It wore brass with more pride than the building had earned. Lena saw the elevator's iron gate and did not swear only because she needed her mouth for not answering. "Back," Eli said, not loudly, and they were, door closing with the courtesy of late guests. "Reset," Hallie said, breaths at rail. Bell on 2. "Gabe, don't be brave. Brave is how you get kept." They went down 1 more flight. B, the green.
The blue.
Storage de-doing its spare cough. Chair leg, bicycle tire. The brick line burned a thin line into Lena's palm and made a rule. Gabe's gum looked like a sin. He swallowed it without being told and made his mouth honest. "Don't stop," Marchand said. Pauses invite narrative. They did not stop. They did not answer. They turned on the landing and climbed, numbers refusing, breath insisting. 1 offered itself. They opened. This time, green paint, hydrangea lying about being living, the lonely stool at the male slots, the smell of old onion and radiator. It was theirs. "Again," Eli said. "Do not hum your own relief." In the vestibule, Marchand turned to face the stairwell and tapped the bell once with his cane. Gentle. The note went up and the building took it and did not give it back. Counted, Lena thought, and then wrote it on the inside of her cheek with her teeth, because the building had earned the word only on paper, not spoken. Outside, the cold snapped at Mr. Rawlings's ear. The snow had arranged itself into meaning only families and dogs understand. Eli had a car stopped in the no parking with its flashers doing contrition. They buckled Mr. Rawlings into a seat that would not regret him. Lena stood on the sidewalk with the bell quiet and the ribbon around it a little damp. Hallie stood inside with her hand flat on the vestibule glass because she always asked the building to forgive her after she had been rude. Gabe shook his hands like a drummer about to behave. "Back up," Eli said. "Pipe still bleeding. Bring carts. Bring towels. Do not bring mirrors." They returned as a different procession, the kind with mops and willingness. On 3, water had made itself at home. You could see where it planned to sit for a while. The apartment doors had towels stuffed at their bottoms like bad drafts. The ceiling had learned to sag with a courage it did not deserve. car arrived with a roll of plastic and a stapler like a nurse's tray. The young couple from 3C brought 2 sweating shop backs and a look you wear when a thing breaks and you decide to be citizens. Gabe ran cable like a man trying to teach electricity not to bite. Eli wrenched a valve in the ceiling that had been waiting to be relieved for 30 years and swore in 3 languages. The pipe coughed to surrender, and the water remembered to obey gravity without trying to widen its job description. In the midst of the human work, the stairwell tried its trick. 3 went to 2 went to be if you climbed fast. Lena felt it the way you feel a friend deciding to be clever during a move. She touched the rail and counted, and the cleverness gave up, offended. Ribbon, Hallie said, and Lena tied blue on 3 new places so the blue could have a stomachache and leave 3 alone. By 3:03, because the building is a comedian when you take your eyes off the clock, the knock choir tested the air, saw that mouths were occupied with towels and swearing and the tack-tack of a cheap staple gun biting plastic into wall, and decided there was no audience. It folded its breath like linen and put itself away. At 4:12, the hall looked like something a decent person could leave until morning. Eli wrote "Do not hum" in grease pencil on the busted fixture and then erased it because his profession does not confess to writing on walls. Coffee, Marchand said, and no one made fun of him calling it that. He set a thermos among the morals and poured into the lids like communion. He was too old for the stairs, but not too old for cups. They stood on 2, hand to rail, cups to mouths, silent because they had run out of talking and because sometimes silence is what you pay a building when you can't afford an apology. Gabe played traffic cop for 2 shoppers who tried to carry a mattress at 4 and forgot it was 2 and forgave themselves quickly for not knowing what they had signed when they signed their lease. On Lena's doormat, later, a word. Good again, the clerk's hand. Under it, H, tidy like a ledger line. Under that, another line, smaller, as if the chalk knew it had to save itself. Count your way home. Lena took the compact from the high cabinet, the cupboard where she had told it to sulk, and saw the dust ring it had left on the shelf, a shadow mouth. She wiped it with a damp towel, then burned the towel on the stove, because sometimes superstition is how you keep a building from feeling like it's winning. Don't set off the alarm, Hallie said from the doorway, not startled, leaning like the kind of friend who has earned the right to scold in your kitchen. Also, I brought you donuts. I brought you gratitude, Lena said. And I won't ring the bell until Sunday. They set the donuts on the table and the bell beside them and ate with the greedy decorum of night workers who have learned that sugar can count for love. Journal jumped up and tried to bat the ribbon off the bell, and then decided she respected ceremony and batted the donut box instead. At the museum, Minerva looked at Lena's face and said, "You moved someone out in the snow." "How did you know?" Lena asked, half flattered, half wary of the story, leaving the building that contained it. "Your coat smells like salt and apology," Minerva said. "Also, you have blue paint on your cuff." Lena rubbed at the smear with her thumbnail. It didn't come off because it was not paint. She smiled anyway because sometimes you smile at things that will not obey you, so they don't think they're winning. At 3, the knock choir tried again in the fennel, and the building made its throat, and the bell in the service hall rang once, insulted and consenting. Lena lay on her couch and did not answer. Her phone wrote counted at the end of silence with handwriting that belonged to the building and also a little bit to her. The next morning, a 4th postcard waited. The photograph was the fennel stairwell from the bottom up, the spiral like a cinnamon bun that preferred iron. On the back, in H's tidy hand, "If you forget everything, do not hum, do not mirror, do not go alone, do not think out loud. Write a word instead. Make it dull. Make it true. Under that, smaller, I am not stairs. I am rude, on purpose, on your behalf.
Ash.
Lena taped the card to the inside of the utility door, where only the people who were going to break rules would see it. She touched the ribbon at the rail. She counted 1 breath, 2, 3. She shut the door. She rang the bell once with a mercy that felt like violence. The building did not object. On B, the blue line kept its edge. Storage D breathed like a room the law did not want to define. The chalk marks H had left at ankle height held their powder. Next to them, new dashes had begun. Careful, careful. making a ladder of refusal across a building that would always prefer to be clever. The fennel had not been solved. Buildings don't get solved.
It had learned something.
It had been taught to keep a roll, even if the roll was basil taped to a wall and ribbon on a rail, and a bell rung on Sundays by a man whose cane kept time. It had been given a procession and grudged them a lobby when they needed it, which, in the ledger of cities, is as much as you will ever get from a place that is older than your name. And when the even floors asked for a hum, the women of the fennel swallowed the song and wrote an O on their teeth and counted their way home. Chapter 10, The Ladder. The fire panel in the lobby said trouble in a board read that meant not yet, but give me a reason. The radiator's song sharpened into cymbals. Somewhere in the old wing, a wire forgot its work and tried heat instead. At 011, Eli texted a word he didn't like to write. Evac? At 013, the elevator took offense and parked itself between floors like a man calming down. At 0:15 a.m., thin ribbon of chill threaded under every apartment door, the polite breath the stairwell gives when it wants an audience. On Lena's doormat, chalk, small and sideways, bring many. Under it, left at 3. The initials H so tidy they could have been printed. She saw it at the same time the building exhaled its first false alarm, 3 short beeps like coughs, and the lights in the hallway dropped to their dim parade. Journal sat at the utility door and put her paw under it and left it there like a plug trying to keep the house from draining. Lena put on her coat. She took the bell from its hook and tied it to her belt with blue ribbon in a square not Eli would have approved of even on a ship. She pocketed the chalk and the basil and the painter's tape. She opened her door to Hallie, already lacing her shoes with the consequential energy of a woman who makes rules out of errands. Trouble, Hallie said, not a question. Bring many, Lena said, showing the chalk. Left at 3. Perfect, Hallie said, with a fierce, rude joy of someone who has been waiting for a good job.
Get Eli.
Get Marchand. Get the kids who think stairs are a sport. We're going up if Down insists on performing. The stairwell had a smell like wetness trying to rehearse smoke. Not fire, yet. An electrical wrongness, the kind of cheap candy smell a transformer wears before it sins. On 2, Kara stood with her cat under one arm and her husband in socks. She had a jam jar of basil like a bouquet at a wedding that never happens on time. On 3, Mr. Rawlings had his dining chair again, stubborn throne, knees set to complain later. On 4, a teenager from 4B who thought he was immortal held 4 flashlights like options. On 5, Marchand waited with his cane and a coil of ribbon, hat tilted like a bride. On 6, 2 young mothers had children in pajamas, and the look of people who will learn anything if you give it to them as a list. Eli clattered up behind, wrench in back pocket, radio hissing the word panel like a name tag at a reunion. It's the old wing, he said softly. Smoke, not fire.
Yet.
I've got the shutoff for the breaker. But the elevator's sulking, and we don't know which lobby we'll get if we're dumb.
We're not dumb, Hallie said.
We're rude and early. They made a procession without practice. Brickline tied to rails at 1 and 2 and 3 until the building would have to show its face to tangle them. Children assigned to chalk at ankle height, dashes in a diagonal like H had taught. Basil taped at the turn of B to insult blue by scent instead of speech. The bell at Lena's hip light as an instruction until it wasn't. Rules, Hallie said to the gathered. Don't hum. Don't count out loud. If your mouth wants to help, put words on the wall. 1 word. Dull and true. NO is good. Home is good. Left is good at 3. Do not be clever. Clever gets kept. Left at 3, Kara repeated, and the cat on her hip swatted the air once like in. They set out to be a ladder in a place that prefers to be a well. At 2, the window showed their city. At 3, a different year's snow. At 4, Lena's hallway ready to lie. At 5, green paint in a shade the building hadn't learned yet. The stairwell tried the old trick. Up became down when you weren't watching, and met lines of chalk like stitches and ribbon like marriage, and a bell that did not want to be grand, but was willing to be useful. When 3 tried to slide into B, a child drew a dash at ankle height and wrote an O in a hand that would one day fill forms. The step took the chalk and decided to be a step. When 4 tried to be a lobby with the wrong hydrangea, Marchand tapped his cane once and wrote home on the wall, and the door calmed into the paint it had been told it was. At the turn where even floors ask politely for your mouth, the urge to hum rose like steam. Lena bit her cheek until iron. The bell knocked once against her leg and made a sound so small it was almost indecent. The knock choir below inhaled sharply, as if offended joyfully. Right, Hallie said without looking, and Lena took the chalk and wrote an O on the rail, and her hand shook. Gabe, 2 steps down, wrote up slowly like a person writing a foreign word he has decided to own. On B, the blue shone like a boy at a window seeing his own reflection for the first time and thinking he deserved applause. Storage D breathed a chair cough and a bicycle tire syllable and the hinge sound that means someone has decided to stand. At ankle height, fresh chalk dashes glowed. A small H alongside had smudged like a thumb passed over it in satisfaction. On the concrete, new words in tidy hand. Right, not say. Left at 3. I'll take care of D. H. Bless her rudeness, Hallie said, and even Eli let himself be sloppy enough to say, Amen. 3 floors above, the light flickered. Not fire, not yet threat. Eli muttered to his radio. Somebody in the panel room said something obscene about fuses. Up now, he said. Roof. The hatch. Early. It likes early. They climbed as together as a building allows. Each landing took a word. An O on 2, home on 3, early on 4, left under the stair window on 5 with an arrow to remind feet. Children drew basil leaves poor as hands. The blue wrinkled its nose where ribbon touched iron. Kara's husband, the one with socks, began to hum out of habit. Hallie reached back and put 2 fingers flat against his throat, rude, efficient. His hum cut off like a ribbon snipped. At the top, the stair door said roof in letters that wanted to matter. The bar refused to give. Lena set down the bell, took the chalk, and wrote counted at shoulder height on the paint as if submitting a form, not asking a favor. Eli leaned into the bar with his body, like a man tilting an argument. The door moved half an inch and then more, and cold came in like a truth. They spilled out into a night the color of metal, snow arranged into shy arrangements in corners. The city honest for once. Sirens not for them. Yet, another building's temper. The fennel exhaled under their feet, offended and generous. They stood with the ridiculous dignity of refugees of nothing, of people who have chosen to be careful in a world that likes your care, but doesn't love you for it. Kara tucked the cat inside her coat and zipped to the chin. The children, taught by the chalk, traced basil leaves in frost. Marchand held his hat to his head with one hand and wrote stay on the parapet with the other, just to see if a wall could learn a rule. At 0:59, fire trucks arrived because gods do listen if you speak in the languages they employ. Eli waved. A man on a ladder waved back, bureaucracies recognizing each other across the street. Down on the sidewalk, the vestibule doors opened to the right lobby. Hydrangea in its plastic pitcher, not smug for once, merely present. And men in coats came in to inspect valves and declare admiration for old iron. Back, Eli said when his radio used the word clear. Up is a job, down is a job. We do them both on purpose. They returned by the same ladder they had made with ribbon and chalk and their own refusal to sing. At 3, Lena wrote thank you so small it could have been dust. Hallie did not scold her. Gratitude scuffed is still gratitude. At B, a new chalk dash had appeared, diagonal, the H next to it small, the line beneath in tidy hand. Mirror moved. Under that, don't look. Of course she did it, Marchand said, awe tucked so deep under his disapproval that only those who loved him could see it. Of course she did the one rude theft we couldn't afford. Good, Hallie said. Let her be the one. In 4C, Lena unlocked the utility door and climbed down 2 steps to the little landing where the ledger had kept its old breath. On the shelf, wrapped in old linen, tied in ribbon, sat a square heavier than glass, the shape of something that wants to be admired and can live on less if it must. A note on top, in blue ink in a tidy hand that had learned its letters when letters were taught to stand up straight. Do not bring it. I will dispose. You keep the ribbon.
Ash.
Lena didn't lift the linen. She put the ribbon in her pocket like a child who has been told she may take one thing home, nothing shiny. She stood with the little light on, the air cool at her wrists, and said what she never says aloud, because H had asked on every card. Not a ghost. The stairwell did not object. On her kitchen counter, her phone recorded 10 minutes of room tone and then caught, at the very end, a voice that was her own and not, shaped like pencil on paper. We go up. She slept with journal in the hollow of her knees. The stairwell's breath settled. The hydrangea in the plastic pitcher went back to being fake in a way that was almost comforting. On the doormat, at dawn, chalk. Good in the clerk's hand, under it. H, tiny. Under that, ring Sundays. They did. Epilogue, the rules you can live with. Summer softened the blue, or perhaps the basil got better at being basil. The hydrangea's plastic pitcher cracked, and someone replaced it with a glass one that made the lobby look like it had gone to the dentist and come back with a wider smile. The utility door in Lena's living room learned to mind its draft most days. The bell on the service door acquired fingerprints in the shape of a congregation. They called the things they did ceremonies when they wanted to feel ridiculous enough to be brave. Sundays at noon, one ring. Children fought to pull the ribbon. Marchand pretended to be offended and let them win. New tenants received a folded paper slid under their doors. The fennel. Rules for not being clever, with a list written in Lena's block and Hallie's impatience and Eli's caution, and, at the bottom, in smaller print, if you forget everything, do not hum, do not mirror, do not go alone, do not think out loud. Write a word instead. Make it dull. Make it true. Someone had drawn a basil leaf that had learned to be a heart if you looked at it sideways. Gabe started showing up to climbs without being asked, and then one day without gum. He got more deliveries right on the first try, told dispatch the building had stopped putting floors in its pocket because he had learned to keep his. Kara's husband stopped humming while he shaved and, left unsupervised in the afternoons, began whistling softly to the cat in a key the stairwell couldn't translate. Mr. Rawlings took to sitting on the 2 landing with his chair like a municipal sculpture. Children learned to say hello and count their breaths without making a sound, which is an odd skill to teach, but useful. Twice a year, the fennel brought down something from the blue and left something in return. Never a mirror. H had taken care of the last one, the one that had taught the old super a lesson the building was too greedy to forget. Once it was a pencil cup with 3 sharp pencils in it from 1978. They put it on the mailroom counter, and everyone wrote their apartment numbers neater for a week. Once it was a tin of buttons that could have belonged to anyone's grandmother, and therefore everyone's. The children made necklaces that smelled like tin and old soap. They left bottle caps and basil leaves, and once a single cufflink shaped like a star. Trade, not theft. Etiquette, not worship. H kept writing. Little chalk notes at ankle height that said left at 3, salt at B, line taut, count home. In winter she wrote on postcards that arrived without stamps, photographs of the fennel when cornices were politics and hats were weather, with lines on the back like, I am rude on purpose on your behalf. Stop thanking me.
Ash.
In summer she left nothing and June drew the chalk from the wall like sweat. That was a good season for beginners because the building got lazy and you could learn to say an O before you learned to want to sing. The blue kept its insult. It breathed a little behind storage D. Once at 3, the knot choir braided up the well, as if to test the neighborhood. Half the building felt its mouths get ready to be helpful. Nobody sang. The children wrote an O at ankle height and stomped their feet, because that is what children do when words need help. The bell did not ring. The blue made a face nobody could see, because some emotions are only for walls, and receded. Lena kept her phone on the counter at night, voice memos set like a superstition she refused to confess to. It recorded 10 minutes of decent silence, and then a single word every time, written in air in her own voice and not. Counted, then in spring we count, then after the night of the trouble and the ladder, a new word that embarrassed her with its small pride. Up. She transcribed none of it. She taped nothing to the fridge except Basil water schedules and H's postcards, and the list that had kept her alive the first month when she had learned how to breathe like arithmetic. Sometimes the stairwell still tried. It is a building. It believes in its own jokes. Sometimes 4 wanted to be B, and B wanted to be a room with an old dance poster and a calendar that wouldn't be argued with. The ribbon on the rails stayed blue and made the blue mind its table manners. The chalk in the cup at B got replaced on Thursdays. Someone anonymous drew a basil leaf with a little vein that looked like a smile. Journal kept sneaking her paw under the utility door and coming away chalky. "You were not invited," Lena told her, and Journal, who had never needed an invitation to anything, blinked with a particular mercy of animals. "I am here when you come back." On Lena's doormat, the chalk left fewer words, and then, one morning in September, one last, "Ring Sundays," the line under it neat as ledger, H slightly slanted as if written while standing up from a chair. Lena left it there for an hour, then for a day, then until foot traffic made its own decision to become erasure. When people asked, friends who visited and were told nothing that would make them stupid, why she stayed, Lena said what you say when a place teaches you to count. Because it's honest about wanting my mouth. On nights when the stairwell behaved, she made pasta with too much basil and took a plate to Marchand and one to Eli and set a jar on the 2 landing for the children who had drawn their little ladders at ankle height. On Sundays at noon, she rang once and the building stood for it, embarrassed and cooperative. The fennel did not convert. It learned a habit. Up remained a job. Down remained a job. The thing in the blue continued to be the thing in the blue. Bicycles, chair leg, the sound of someone deciding not to sing. And when someone new signed a lease and stood with a plant in their arms and the elevator sulking, Lena would meet them in the lobby with a folded paper and a basil cutting and say, without ceremony, because ceremony has to earn itself, "You'll want to count. In bone, not out loud. If you hear anything at 3, write an O on your teeth and home on the wall. If the stairs try to be clever, be rude. If you're going down when you meant to go up, bring many. We'll make a ladder." Sometimes, rarely, she would say the last part, the sentence that makes buildings into towns if anybody's listening. "If you get lost, that's not the end. Count your way home." On the kitchen counter, the phone wrote its last word for the night. After a decent silence felt like a kindness both ways. Counted. The bell on the service door kept its own secrets and its own schedule. It is a bell's job to be quiet most days. When it rang, it was because somebody had gone too far, or because the building had been forgiven again for not being solved. Left at 3. Write, not say. Trade, not steal. Basil by the blue. Ribbon on the rail. Count your way home.
Up.